and welcome to Jackson Hole Eco Tour Adventures Wildlife Wednesday Monthly Roundup. I'm Tenley.
And I'm Tyler.
And we've got so many great videos to show you from all over the greater Yellowstone ecosystem and some great updates on our local wildlife. Let's go ahead. We'll get started with a great wolf update from Yellowstone National Park.
Winter is one of the best times to see the greater Yellowstone's top predator, the gray wolf. And every winter, Eco Tour Adventures has several tours in which guests get to go to the northern range of Yellowstone and have a really good chance of seeing wolves in a wintry landscape, interacting with other packs and with their prey. So far this winter, we have had many exciting opportunities to see wolves interact in Yellowstone National Park, including the Junction Butte Pack playing on a frozen lake here. The Junction Butte Pack is currently one of the largest packs in Yellowstone, numbering over 20 members. While the Junction Butte Pack is one of the more famous wolf packs in Yellowstone, they can actually be really hard to see in the winter. The reason for that is they have an incredibly extensive territory stretching across basically the entire northern range of Yellowstone. Because of this incredibly extensive range, the Junction Butte Pack is one of the packs we often see interacting in territorial disputes. For our next video, viewer discretion is advised because we actually do have footage of a territorial dispute between the Junction Butte Pack and the Carnelian Pack. Now, the Carnelian Pack is a wolf pack that no longer exists. This video was actually taken 2 years ago and was just kind of brought to our attention, and we wanted to share it with you all. In this video, a member of the Carnelian wolf pack is surrounded by the Junction Butte pack. And you can see that they're definitely not happy to see this wolf in their territory. This is something that occurs very often in Yellowstone, especially during the breeding season. Wolves will often invade each other's territories looking for mates and also for food, especially as elk and other herbivores migrate to new areas of the park. Now, this interaction did not end well for this Carnelian wolf. This Carnelian wolf was killed by the Junction Butte Pack, and this is actually something that's very common in Yellowstone. However, the Junctions don't just interact with the Carnelian Pack, they also interact with other wolf packs, including the Rescue Creek Pack. So here we have the Rescue Creek Pack in a recent sighting actually from this January and last December. And the Rescue Creek Pack is actually a wolf pack that's descended from the Junction Buttes. And they have been able to carve out their own territory. And how they were able to do this is they kind of found this piece of land that had been occupied previously by the Carnelian wolves. The Carnelian wolves had unfortunately been wiped out by other rival wolf packs. However, the Rescue Creek made a go of it and actually succeeded in securing a strong territory in between the 8 Mile and the Junction Butte Pack. The Rescue Creek Pack is currently still around, but the Junction Butte Pack and Rescue Creek are not the only wolf packs we see while we're on tour. Over the past 2 winters, we have been able to observe the 8 Mile Pack. This pack can be difficult to see, especially since they live in more forested and mountainous country than the other packs previously mentioned. However, their dynamics are just as interesting. Recently, the 8 Mile Pack split into 2 separate packs. The new one's called Lupin Creek and includes some of the largest members from the 8 Mile Pack, including this incredibly large black male. We saw him last winter and we saw him again this January, and we were just incredibly impressed by the size of this animal. Wolves don't just live in Yellowstone National Park. We actually have a good population of wolves that live throughout the northwestern part of Wyoming. And occasionally we're incredibly lucky to see them in Grand Teton National Park as well. Here is a lone wolf that was spotted in Grand Teton National Park earlier this month. While wolves are not seen as consistently down here as in Yellowstone, when we do see them, it does provide a really special treat for our guests, a really unexpected treat. And we are happy to have wolves down here as well as up north in Yellowstone. If you would like to learn more about Yellowstone wolves, you can always join us on tour in Yellowstone or Grand Teton National Park, or you can check out our web store and purchase this book, Yellowstone Wolves, written and edited by Doug Smith and Dan Staler.
Getting up into Yellowstone National Park to see those large carnivores is one of our favorite trips during the winter. And we don't get to go up there very often, but when we do, it's always exciting. We always see lots of action, and we see lots and lots of wolves and other carnivores. All right, guys, so up next we have Kirk talking about tracks, something that we get to talk about a lot on tour during the winter.
Hey everybody, it's Kirk here. I'm out on a little cross-country ski tour. Hasn't snowed in a few days, so I think that we'll have an opportunity to find a lot of tracks out here. The winter is one of my favorite times of the year because although it seems kind of quiet and dead and desolate and cold, it's really quite active. I think there's a lot of animals out here hustling to make ends meet and leaving these tracks behind for us to find. So follow along with me today and I'll be able to show you what I find out here. So we've got our first set of tracks here belong to a coyote. They're certainly a canine's track where you get a foot pad here and then 4 toes, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can draw an X between these toes and the foot pad. That tells us that it belongs to a canine. And I don't think that they belong to a wolf because it's not a very big track. You know, maybe half the length of my finger, a couple inches. I've seen wolf tracks about the size of my hand. I'd expect a coyote to be making its way through the forest here, maybe looking for rodents, maybe like mice or voles, or maybe even squirrels. Something to feed that metabolism and help this coyote carry through the winter and generate heat. And there goes these tracks. Now, while this isn't a track in the snow, I think that it's a pretty interesting piece of sign. What we have here in this aspen tree are a set of bear claws. And I'll zoom in here so you can see that for yourself. Maybe a black bear was climbing this tree, looking for a safe place to rest in the fall, or maybe accessing some sort of food resource up there. But regardless, it's left behind this sign for us to know that it was here. And I just think it's so cool to find these tracks, a sign, and bring to light what was here when we couldn't see it. I think that it really brings a forest to life. Here's another track that belongs to a pretty small animal. A small weasel called an ermine that's jumping along, putting its whole body into each track here. And I'll show you that we can see where it's landed, and then it's jumping out and scraping this snow and putting its whole body into the next jump, and the next one, and the next one. And I can see their tracks all over this place because they need to stay really active in the winter. They're long and slender, so they lose a lot of heat, and that means that they're constantly hunting. Maybe listening, searching for mice under the snowpack, moving into their dens, feeding on them, digesting them, metabolizing and generating heat, and then moving along, looking for their next victim. If you're a person, I think, they're really cute. They're one of my favorite animals out here, the ermine. But if you're a mouse, they're kind of a monster. All right, we've got a big track here. Looks like somebody might have been walking through here without any snowshoes on, post-holing through the snow. But instead, I can tell you that this track belongs to a moose. These moose have long legs that'll penetrate through the snowpack and flexible hip joints that allow them to pick those legs up and out of the snow, almost like a swimmer, picking their arms up and out of the water. And then this depression here is where a moose decided to take a rest, probably a digestion break, where it's gonna regurgitate some of the twigs and buds that it's been nibbling on. and chew on them for a little while longer just to break them down a bit further before sending them off to its other stomachs, where they'll be fermented and lipids and proteins will be extracted. So maybe this moose sat down here for an hour or two and then left behind the evidence of the digestion process and then continued onwards. What I think we found today is not only a lot of cool tracks, but when you are hiking around, skiing around with a more intentional eye, the forest is gonna open itself up to you and tell you all of its secrets. And today we've seen tracks from ermine, moose, and coyotes, and so many more.
All right, thanks very much to Kirk. Now look, we've given you a video from Yellowstone National Park for the wolf breeding season. We've given you a video that was shot in Grand Teton National Park. But another place we spend a huge amount of our time in the winter in particular is the National Elk Refuge, which sits just between Grand Teton National Park and Jackson, Wyoming, where we're broadcasting live to you now. So let's check in with Sarah Ernst. This one's a little bit of a flashback, wasn't taken this month, but is one of my favorite videos, talking a little bit about our local residents. They're about a quarter of a mile from where I'm standing right now, our local bighorn sheep herd, with a little bit of a view of both them and the predator-prey interactions that we oftentimes see out on the elk refuge. Let's check in.
Hello, this is Guide Sarah Ernst, and I'm currently here in my driveway, which as you can see has a heck of a lot of snow. The long-legged moose can cope with such deep snow, but most of the other hoofed animals, they have to get the heck out of here in the wintertime. And they will be migrating down to areas that are a bit less snow, maybe because they're windswept, or south-facing slopes where the sun is melting the snow. One of the animals that's always a highlight of any of our winter wildlife watching trips for both the guides and our visitors are the bighorn sheep. Bighorn sheep have been migrating from the high elevation lands around Jackson Hole to the low-lying buttes in the southern end of the valley for hundreds, if not many thousands of years. This is based on archaeological evidence from the Tukadika, or the mountain sheep-eater people. To this day, there are hunting blinds, sheep traps, and teepee rings found in many locations around the historic wintering grounds of the bighorn sheep. Sadly, due to disease and habitat loss, Jackson Hole's bighorn sheep herds have shrunk in population over the years, and this continues to be a threat to the herd today. But considering many other ski resort towns have lost their bighorn sheep altogether, we are really blessed to have a large herd of bighorn sheep right on the edge of town on the National Elk Refuge. Bighorn sheep usually arrive on the elk refuge during the first half of the breeding season, which peaks from November to December. Most of the fighting we see occurs pretty early on as the males establish their pecking order for the season, but we will still continue to see some conflicts through early January and even later on in the winter as the young males practice. It's always exciting to view the rut of any of our large animals, but there is something special about the bighorn sheep. Maybe because we know it's the last of the season. At just 6 months, bighorns have a shorter gestation period than our other hoofed animals. Or maybe it's the drama. There are long moments of quiet tension as the sheep engage in their highly ritualized preparation for contact, followed by the shockingly loud, violent moment of impact. The males are literal battering rams as they work out the pecking order. The most powerful and dominant males do most of the breeding while the young males try to sneak around behind the backs of the exhausted big males. Imagine the force generated as the rams smack their 30-pound heads at one another at 20 miles per hour. If we humans were to hit the ground head first from a motorcycle at such a speed, without a helmet, we'd be lucky to get away with just a concussion. Yet bighorn do this over and over again for weeks, and while we can't ask them if they suffer headaches from it, they rarely seem to show any ill effects. Bighorn sheep have built-in helmets on their skulls, thick, shock-absorbing skulls, and keratin horn sheaths that absorb some of the blow. Mechanisms that slow down blood flow through the chambers around their skull help cushion the brain, like bubble wrap cushions a delicate package. Still, bighorn have to hit each other at a precise angle to minimize the damage. You'd think that a male would want to injure or kill his opponent. After all, it would be one less potential suitor for the females to choose from. But a fight that could injure your opponent could also injure you, even if you were the victor. And an injured opponent could lure in predators that could then threaten you or your offspring. And that brings us to a cool moment that we had this week on one of my wildlife and snowshoe combo tours. We began at the National Elk Refuge watching some distant cow elk before moving on to some bighorns that had descended to the bottom of the cliffs for breakfast. Some of my guests might wonder why I'm always scanning the hills for animals a mile away when we had this perfectly good herd of bighorn sheep just 30 yards away from our touring vehicle. And most of the time I have to admit that there's nothing out there at all. But it's always worth searching. And this day, oh boy, were we rewarded for our patience. With my Maven-built binoculars, I noticed a silhouette on the edge of the cliff that looked a little funky. There was a shape of a horn, but it was a weird angle on the ground, and above it there was a small face, topped by a pair of very large ears, too large for a sheep. I put a spotting scope on it to get a closer look, and turned out to be this pair of coyotes feeding on a young male bighorn wedged right into the cliff. What was unusual about this event was the timing and the age of the sheep. Like most ungulates, bighorn sheep are at their most hardy at the beginning of winter, when they still have plenty of body fat reserves. We tend to see more carcasses in the second half of winter, as the animals are progressively weakened by poor forage and winter conditions. And this was a young male, so he should have been in pretty good health. Coyotes aren't major predators of adult bighorn sheep, although they do sometimes take lambs in the spring, if they can catch them. The size of a bighorn, 100 to 300 pounds, is pretty tough for a pair of 30-pound coyotes to take down. Though he's closer in size to a female than a big mature ram, something would have still had to trip the odds for the coyotes to be able to catch the sheep. Plus, bighorns can elude most predators on the cliffs with their rubbery hooves. That's why we seldom see bighorns away from the nearby cliffs. Looking at the way this sheep was wedged into the cliff, we can only speculate what happened. Did he fall to his death from up above? Did he get stuck and then fall prey to the coyotes? Or suffer an injury that made him easier to catch? Or did he just happen to die there on his own from disease or maybe after being hit by a car? We just couldn't tell from our parking spot, but it sure was an interesting mystery. Regardless of whether they found or killed the sheep, a coyote never knows when its next meal is coming from. Coyotes get most of their winter diet here in the elk refuge from rodents and scavenging, both of which are unreliable food sources. So these coyotes wolfed down their meal as fast as they could. A coyote's stomach can easily hold 5 pounds of meat or more. In proportion to their size, that's like a 150-pound human consuming an entire 25-pound turkey for Thanksgiving. Though a canine's digestive system can handle a meal that size better than we could, I can't help but think that the post-meal nap these two coyotes did felt really good.
All right, so a big thanks to all of our contributors to our videos this week from all our guides at the Jackson Hole Eco Tour family. Couple pieces of housekeeping and then we'll get into trivia.
Sounds great.
First of all, we've been nominated for Best of Jackson Hole for Best Wildlife Tour. Now, we've won gold. We've gotten first place for the last 3 consecutive years since the category existed. And we're hoping that we can get your help to win a 4th time. So Kelsey, our moderator, everybody say hi to Kelsey in the comment section, is going to put a link up to the Best of Jackson Hole webpage. If you have 5 minutes of your life, we'd be incredibly grateful if you'd consider voting for us for Best Wildlife Tour, and then also Best Eco-Friendly Business. Our owner, Taylor Phillips, is up for Best Boss, which we think is very well deserved.
That's incredibly well deserved.
And then we have 4 of our guides that are up for Best Wildlife Guide, including Drew, Bo, Jeff, and me, Totally.
Woohoo.
So feel free to go vote for us. We'd really appreciate it. Kelsey will put up a link for you. That would be, if you want to support us and you enjoy our videos, that would be incredibly meaningful, because that definitely makes a big difference for us. Second of all, we've got a couple seats left on our February Winter Wolves Tour, which happens in late February. And we do have a discount program running on that just because we'd love to fill it. You know, those snow coaches are so much more fun when there's a party in them, right? So any more details, feel free to go to our website or comment, and Kelsey can give you more details. We'll also have Kelsey link to that tour so you guys can check it out. If you want to go see the Northern Range during wolf breeding season, all of that footage you just saw, for the most part, was taken during our last winter Yellowstone tour just last month. So
it was like a smattering of like Winter Wolves tour from last year, and then a winter multi-day tour that we just completed. So if you want to see wolves interacting just like you saw in the videos, then definitely go and check out that tour.
There's nothing like it anywhere in the world. And it's going to be a really, really fun trip. So definitely check those two things out. Okay, enough with housekeeping. It's time for my second favorite part of the program, which is our trivia. Yeah. Okay, so our trivia is, of course, as always, sponsored by our EcoTour Adventures online store. Kelsey, we're going to put you hard at work again. She's going to give us a link to that as well. Is she keeping track? That's 3 links, Kelsey. I'm being a jerk today. And of course, there's lots of really fun stuff on there, including that wolf book that we referenced in that first video. Also, you can see on that picture there, my favorite, Death in Yellowstone. It's my favorite book, because I'm gory like that. It's fantastic. If you just enjoy our videos and you want to support us, we can always take donations to support the guides. Any donation you give on our website goes directly to our guides, and I'm sure they'd appreciate that. Of course, we're super happy to offer this free of charge to everybody, just because we love seeing all this stuff out in the field and showing it to you. But people do always ask how they can be supportive. So between Best of Jackson Hole and our web store, feel free to check out all those fun goodies. Okay, enough is enough. Let's talk to our
Let's do
quiz
trivia.
master.
Yes. Trivia King.
Trivia King.
All right. So last month we asked a question about bighorn sheep, and just to remind everyone, here's the question. What is the biggest threat to bighorn sheep on the National Elk Refuge? And we had a bunch of great answers. I saw mainly answers that were C and D, and they're actually, those answers are kind of related. I was looking for C and pneumonia. That is the biggest killer of bighorn sheep on the refuge. And cars can contribute to pneumonia, but overall, most of the bighorn sheep do end up dying from bacterial pneumonia. And we found that bighorn sheep populations go through cycles. About 10 years ago, this bighorn sheep population numbered about 500. And at that time, that was the peak in their population. Right after that, they had a population crash, and a huge proportion of the herd was actually killed off by pneumonia. Cars can contribute to this by giving them toxins, and then also lowering their immune system, making them more susceptible to the disease. We are reaching another peak in our elk refuge bighorn sheep population, and the bighorn sheep that live on the elk refuge are part of a bigger population that's found throughout the Gros Ventre Mountains, and we find that this population does cycle, crash with pneumonia, and then grow to a peak of about 500 animals, and then they tend to crash again. We're at about 500 animals. So if you are visiting the refuge, be sure to not let the sheep lick your vehicle so that they don't get pneumonia. Pretty crazy. You'll see signs everywhere for it, and then if you see other people doing that, just be a friendly citizen and let them know.
They don't know any better. They think it's really cool. For those of you that are confused, it's called ovine, meaning sheep, infectious pneumonia. And of course, before I'd heard of this, I was like, wait, pneumonia, that's not infectious. This specific style, which humans cannot get, is infectious. But there's a lot of new research that's coming out on it, and there's a lot of confusion. There seems to be a reservoir of the disease all the time in certain herds, and it's only when immune system responses drop, maybe, that these outbreaks occur, but it does seem to be affected by population levels.
And there seems to be quite a bit of variability between populations. So like some populations just go extinct. They can't handle it. Some of them cycle, and then some of them seem to have resistance towards it. I used to live in Colorado, and the Poudre Canyon had a bighorn sheep population that got wiped out from pneumonia. It was killing all the lambs, and so there was no new sheep to replace the ones that were dying of old age. And so it's really interesting to look at all the different populations and see how this disease is affecting them. And it is a non-native disease. It comes from domestic sheep.
It does, yeah.
And it's actually seven different types of bacteria, which is crazy. That
Yeah,
are all
that's why it's so hard
interacting.
to understand what's going on here. It is it was originally a European disease that came with domestic European sheep, and was introduced to the New World, which is why wild bighorn sheep have so little resistance against the disease. But it may be that herds that are particularly hard hit over a long period of time and survive have a greater amount of resistance to the disease versus more isolated herds. There's a lot of concern about the herd of sheep that live in the Teton range. We're talking about the herd of sheep right now that live in the Gros Ventre range. So Jackson Hole's surrounded by mountains on all sides, and to the west we have the Teton range, and to the east we have the Gros Ventre range. And the Gros Ventre herd has been repeatedly subjected to ovine infectious pneumonia, but the Teton herd has not had nearly as many outbreaks, and so probably is more vulnerable. In much the same way that canine distemper is not native to the New World. And when wolves were reintroduced in Yellowstone in 1995, distemper was particularly deadly. They only began to see distemper in wild canines, where it transferred from domestic to wild canines in the early 1980s, and they're gradually seeing coyote, fox, and wolf populations develop a certain amount of resistance to the disease. Still very deadly, but over time, these exposures can be minimized. So I have no idea what we have in future for our bighorn sheep herds.
Yeah.
But there is a silver lining to all of this when these big wipeouts occur. I don't get to use the term decimate very often in the English language. It means to kill 1 out of every 10 individuals, right? You can use it, with hyperbole, but in this particular case, ovine infectious pneumonia has the capability to not only decimate, but sometimes see reductions of up to 80, 90%, or even wipe out herds. Now, don't worry about our local sheep. We definitely keep a careful eye on them, but we are anticipating another outbreak sometime soon.
And if you're wondering, there is no vaccination because it is a bacteria.
Yeah.
And so if they get it, then they
get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was really depressing.
Great trivia question. We wanted that to be a little educational in case you ever come in to visit the refuge. Yeah, but I guess we'll move on to this month's trivia question.
Oh, wait, and before we do that, guys, here's how you win. We didn't talk about that yet.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Okay, so
we'll talk about it now.
So to win a gift card to the EcoTour Adventures store for all those cool things we were just showing you, Death in Yellowstone, that wolf book, you could buy for yourself. All you have to do is go and comment on the original video, the answer to our trivia question of the month, and we'll pick one random correct answer winner to win the gift card and contact you if you win. Now, you can't comment on this if it's been shared to like a page or something like that. If you comment there, we won't see it necessarily, so you won't win, but you have to go to the Jacksonville EcoTour original broadcast in order to win. Okay, sorry.
No worries. Yeah, that was really important for you. For everyone. I'm glad we got that information out there. All right, this month's trivia question is about a really cool track. All right, so here is that track. What animal made this track? Gray wolf, mule deer, wolverine, grizzly bear, or northern river otter? I'll be really interested to see what everyone thinks. And if you want extra credit, tell me why you think it is the track that you think it is.
Yeah,
I will be really
Let's leave it up a little longer because I want everybody to really look at this.
Yeah. Definitely take a good look at it. I'm not going to give any hints because I think that would be too easy. But this was a track that was taken, or this picture of the track was taken up in the northern part of Yellowstone. And I will say that it is, it's a pretty special one. All right.
Don't give it away.
I know, I don't want...
It's a really boring ground squirrel. I don't think that was one of the options.
It's a rodent. Just kidding. None of those animals are rodents, so...
It's a bison. No. It would need to be hoofed.
Exactly. I'm actually really excited to see who gets this. And
I was really excited when I saw it, which is giving away more than I should.
I know. We need to stop.
We need to stop talking.
All right, we're gonna stop. We're gonna stop.
Well, we're not gonna stop talking, but we'll stop
giving
giving hints.
Yeah.
Okay, it's time for my favorite part of the broadcast, since that was my second favorite, which is we're here to answer your questions live. So if you have a question about Yellowstone, Grand Teton, the Elk Refuge, Jackson Hole, Western Americana, a naturalist question.
Anything about animals or disease.
Doesn't even have to be local. We'll talk about penguins. That sounds fun.
Exactly.
Or somebody in your family. all ages are welcome, 1 to 100, although babies can't talk at 1. That's a little early. We are here to answer your questions live. Now, there's been a couple that have been asked, so what we'll do is we'll answer in the order received. I don't want to confuse you guys. If you see us looking down, we've got our little iPad here, and we're looking at them as you send them into us. So we're not being rude. We're just reading your questions as they go.
Reading them live as they come in.
Yeah. So let's see here. Let's go ahead and go.
Start at the top.
Start at the top. Let me scroll on up. Oh, well, this isn't a question, but our good friend of EcoTour, who you may have talked to on the phone, Chris Wheeler, had shoulder surgery yesterday. So he's sitting at home with, I assume, all the good drugs. And he was saying where he was from, and he said he was from Jacksonville EcoTour Adventures in Western Wyoming. So Chris, get well soon.
Hope you're feeling better.
We hope you're feeling better. We hope your shoulder's feeling better. But we were thrilled that you tuned in to watch, and that's how you're choosing to spend your sick leave. So our best wishes there. So not a question, but I wanted to point that out. Let's see here.
If you're ever wondering who's part of the team of people who are supporting guides on tour, Chris is one of them.
Yeah.
So is Tenley.
Yeah.
But Chris plays a big part if we ever run into an issue on tour. He's the guy to call. Yeah.
And if you call EcoTour, he's the one who half the
Exactly.
time answers the phone.
Yeah.
So you may have talked to Chris in the past. Let's see here. Libby says, do you think we've gotten enough rain and snow to bring the water levels up? Has Idaho lessened the amount of water that they take? Libby, this is a great question. The short answer I'm going to give you is we won't know till the end of the winter. The slightly longer answer I'm giving you is yes. We've been getting a lot of rain and a lot of snow, and we're very hopeful that the snowpack has built up enough to certainly bring Jackson Lake level waters up, water levels up.
We haven't seen the lake completely filled for the past 2 years, basically. And so we're super excited to see what happens with all the snow. There's a lot of factors that go into it. It's not just the amount of snow, but it's also how quickly it melts, and also what the spring temperatures are, and how much spring weather we get.
Yeah.
And so if you remember last year, it did fill quite a ways, not completely. I believe it went up like 20 feet, which was pretty great. Not completely full, and all of that water basically came from like the end of March and April and May, which was super strange. We had a really low snowpack here, and so snowpack isn't the final factor, but from what we're seeing so far, it's looking good.
Yeah. So snowpack this year is above average. So if you combine the rainy conditions of last year, which certainly made a difference, to our above average snowpack, assuming we get a nice rainy spring, we are hopeful.
Yes.
Now, obviously, a summer drought and things like that are going to affect things. As for has Idaho gotten enough water? Idaho hasn't gotten quite the same degree of water we have, but they've gotten quite a bit as well.
They tend to be a little drier than we are.
Yeah. If you think of rain shadows, right, they're going to be more desert than we are, right? You're going to get more snow falling in the Tetons. The last thing to remember, for those of you guys that are not involved in local water politics in Wyoming, the short version is, in the West, what we do is we argue about water for fun. There's never enough water to go around, no matter what Western state you're talking about. And Wyoming and Idaho are no exception. Water rights are big deal and big business. And the Supreme Court of the United States spends an awful lot of time deciding between states over who gets how much water. The state of Idaho has the right to the water in the Snake River that comes out of Jackson Lake, even though Jackson Lake is in Wyoming. It's a little bit complicated. We're not going to get into why different people get different amounts of water. But basically, all those great Idaho potato farmers that are growing those potatoes that you enjoy, when you eat a McDonald's French fry, those McDonald's French fries are grown specially just on the other side of the Tetons in Idaho. You are drinking Jackson Lake water. Or you're eating Jackson Lake water.
Consuming Jackson
The
Lake
potato
water.
was grown with Jackson Lake water. And the water in the potato, I guess. I don't know. So you're eating snowfall from the Tetons and glacier melt, too. So Idaho has the rights to that water. Idaho can request that water as they please, and the state of Wyoming has to agree to it. They do have to do it in a more ecologically sensitive way than they did when I was a little girl in the 80s, when they would just take it all at once, so that there isn't as much fish death, but it's still an issue. So I'm certainly sounding very biased against Wyoming right now, and I'm not sure that's fair. because I enjoy eating potatoes too. And, you know, we always have to remember that this is not some prehistoric, pristine landscape that people don't live on. People have to make their living and they have to have water to do that. But it does mean, yes, if we get enough water to fill the lake, then yes, Idaho will be able to take their fair share. When we're in drought conditions, they can't take as much water, is my understanding.
And kind of how it was explained to me, I grew up in Colorado, which has similar issues to Wyoming. I grew up.
They get all the water.
They get a lot of the water, yeah. I grew up on the San Juan River, which is a tributary to the Colorado, and downstream states include New Mexico, Arizona, California. And how it was explained to me is we have to send a certain amount of water downstream to them, depending on drought conditions. It varies depending on the year, before we take water for ourselves. Yeah. That's how it was explained to me.
It's all about the different agreements that were made between the states. And the easiest way to understand Western water rights, we don't need to go on and on about this, is basically whoever got statehood first typically got the best deals when it came to water. Yeah. So the most famous argument we have over water in the Western United States is the Colorado River, of course, which the Snake River flows into the Columbia, which flows, up through Oregon. So we're not talking about that right now.
But just over the mountains, we have the Green River, which
does
flow
into the Colorado.
Yeah.
And of course, there's great argument over the Colorado River, and there's not enough water to go around. So basically, the way that the Colorado River was allocated, if you were to do it the way it was done originally and agreed, there wouldn't be enough water by the time you got to the last users, which is why it's just a trickle or nothing by the time it gets into Mexico. So these issues and water and fighting over water in the West certainly aren't going anywhere anytime soon, particularly when we look at issues like climate change. So definitely interesting stuff.
I think they're going to become more contentious with climate change.
Yeah.
Now, one benefit for our tours while Jackson Lake is low is that we get these really cool extensive mud flats.
Yeah.
And especially in the spring and fall, we get tons of migratory shorebirds that show up. I've seen willets, lots of spotted sandpipers out there. And so if you're ever looking for a bird watching tour in Jackson Hole, you can come in the summer and we can show you some cool shorebirds if those mud flats are still there. And if not, we can show you lots of other cool birds.
Yeah. So, and then grizzlies, of course, love low water levels because it's good for fish. So, there are pros and cons to it, right? Bears are the big winners there. Great question. Let's see here. What do we got next? Oh, this is a great one. Don, you always have the best questions. If I were to hike and I got separated from my group and darkness was falling. Ooh, this sounds like a good story. Ooh. What would be the best thing to protect myself from animals throughout the night? Should I climb a tree? I have no flashlight or bear spray. All right, Don, I've got questions for you, and there's not going to be a way for you to answer. I want to know whether it's winter or summer, first of all.
Yeah.
Right? And I want to know if you're on the valley floor or you're up high, because I think... But first things first, let me clear up sort of the biggest question there, which is there's nothing in the woods that's out to eat you. I know you're going, yeah, right, Telly. No, seriously. There are, I think, 6 predatory animals that want to eat you that are on the planet, and none of them live here. So alligators would like to eat you if they get the opportunity and they're big enough. Crocodiles would absolutely like to eat you. Komodo dragons, you are a food source to a Komodo dragon if you get the opportunity. Those are animals that would absolutely eat a human. Grizzly bears, you're not on the menu. The only reason you're going to have a problem from any of our predators is either protection of cubs, protection of resources, a case of mistaken identity, they didn't know you were human, or you startled them and they felt like they had to defend themselves, right? And that's coming straight out of Stephen Herrero's book, which is a great choice. It's called Bear Attacks: Their Causes and Avoidance, which I definitely recommend if you're, once again, gory. I'm sort of gory on my book topics.
And you might be saying, but wait, people have gotten killed in their tents.
Yeah.
Usually there's food in the tent, there's some sort of attractant, or the bear's in really bad condition.
Yeah.
And is desperate for food.
What we're referring to when we talk about animals going after people, that's called a predatory attack. That's an animal who had the intent to go after a human. While predatory attacks are possible from any predator, which is to say it's conceivable, there are very few animals that specifically target people. So a perfect example of what I mean by this. Lions don't typically attack humans. That would be very, very unusual in Africa. But there are exceptions, including the 1888 Lions of Gir, who very famously became predatory and started targeting people. If you really want to horrify yourself, that's a great Wikipedia article.
There's also some really scary tiger
Yes.
stories
There's a couple
about like
famous tigers.
man-eating tigers,
Yeah.
but like those are, it's incredibly rare. Like
Right. Tigers as a whole are not out to eat you. Every once in a while, once in a generation or so, yes, a predatory tiger can exist, but that doesn't mean that all the other tigers are considering a food source. Okay, so same deal. There's nothing in the woods that wants to eat you. There's nothing in the woods that's hunting in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. There's nothing in the woods that's hunting you down. You'd have to go to Florida to experience that. Not here, right? We don't have any poisonous snakes in the Teton Range. We don't have any scorpions that are going to get you either. So really, your biggest concern, if you find yourself trapped or out in the dark and you can't get home, are to prepare yourself for the conditions. The Tetons are really hard to be in.
Yes.
It can freeze even on the valley floor any day of the year. It typically doesn't in July and August, but that doesn't mean it can't, as my tomato plants are proof. And then at altitude, as soon as you get a couple thousand feet up into the mountains, it absolutely will get below freezing without any difficulty. So my concern, if I were caught after dark in the summer, would be to build myself a structure or a shelter that would enable me to not freeze to death. I wouldn't climb a tree. That's a very exposed location, and I'm not worried about any animals coming after me. I might pile up leaves. I might create a windbreak. I might do all sorts of things. I always carry, of course, an emergency blanket when I'm hiking. Having an adequate first aid kit is really key. In the winter, that's a little tougher.
Yeah, so I actually took a wilderness survival course in high school.
Okay, why haven't we been talking when you talk about this?
No, that's fine. No, we both have things to talk about, which is great. What they taught me is you need what's called duft. And duft mimics basically down in a way. Duft could be anything from really dense needles or leaves, anything that is super small and you can pack together to create small spaces to conserve heat. And so what I was taught in a wilderness survival class is if you're caught out there in the winter, you need duft. And so essentially what you would do is you would build a structure out of large sticks that you can crawl into, and it's super tight. And then on top of that, you pile smaller and smaller items until you get to the very top, and you just pile on as much duft as you can. And when I mean a lot of duft, I mean like 3 or 4 feet of it. You would need a lot in order to stay warm. But there are people who have actually survived in the winter overnight using these duft shelters that they actually make. And they're not big. They're essentially like a giant sleeping bag. And they can be this tall, but the hole that you crawl into is only like this big, and that is supposed to keep you warm through the night. I've actually spent a night in the forest. I got lost in the woods when I was 18 on Wolf Creek Pass, and it was the summer, and I built myself a little shelter. And then,
That's scary.
My parents found my truck the next morning, and and I got out. I didn't have a flashlight. I didn't have a headlamp. I was hiking in this area called the Hay Meadows, which isn't its official name, so you probably won't find it, but it was one of the more scary experiences. And something that did come to my mind were large animals. The San Juan Wilderness, the Weminuche Wilderness is right there, and it has a lot of blackberries and mountain lions, and so that was a concern of mine. It was a very cold night. I didn't sleep.
I'm sure you didn't.
Yes.
I got lost in the Tetons once when I was 18. Actually.
Oh, really?
So what is it, about 18?
Oh, cool.
But I had a tent and a sleeping bag. I just didn't have any food. That was kind of a problem.
The hunger.
And I couldn't figure out how to get out. I was supposed to backpack out via Idaho. I'm sorry, I came in via Idaho, and I was supposed to backpack out via Wyoming, and I was going to hike down to Jackson Lake and then canoe across the lake. I had a friend who was bringing me a canoe, and there was no lake. Jackson Lake's pretty big.
Yeah.
And if you don't see a lake, that's a problem. Turns out I had flipped myself around and I was hiking back down the mountain in Idaho. Luckily, I was with a large group of people, and we actually sent out a search plane, and they found us and then directed us out. So still very grateful for that. But it made a great college entrance essay.
I got
That's how I got into college.
search and rescue, so that's pretty cool.
It wasn't actually search and rescue. It was a friend who went up in a plane.
Oh, cool.
Thanks, Matt. Cool. Appreciate that. But anyway, all right, great question. I love that. That was fantastic.
That was a really interesting one. Don's getting creative.
Oh, and then winter, obviously, you can always build snow shelters, which is something to keep in mind. You want an insulating layer underneath you as much as possible, because it's the cold that's coming up from the snow that's really more of an issue, other than windbreaks. I did have a friend, however, who did build a backcountry snow shelter, and it did collapse on him.
Really?
So, and he almost died. So be really careful. Make sure you build a super stable snow structure.
Could he get out of it?
He had a friend who shoveled him out, but it was
Dicey.
close.
Okay.
So yeah, something to keep in mind for sure. Keep yourself safe out there, guys. I used to build lots of snow caves, and then after that happened, I was like way more
I know.
careful.
I'm a little like thinking back to all the snow caves I built. Like,
Yeah. Glad you're okay, Kevin Taylor.
I have a look of terror on my face. You know why?
All right, lots of great answers to our trivia question, which I'm psyched about. Susan told me that told us that we gave away too many hints.
Oh
Susan,
no!
I'm sure we did. We can't help ourselves. Oh, Don, you said it was supposed to be in the summer. Okay, so that's helpful. That's hilarious. Libby, thank you for voting for us. We really, really, really appreciate it. That's a huge deal for us, but that's great. Best of Jackson Hole is just a huge thing for us to be able to win when we can. So yeah, guys, we really appreciate that. Let's see here. I saw another one in here. Oh, Betty, this is so cool. You were back. You were in the Tetons back in 1975.
Wow.
It's changed a lot. I hope you come back and see us, but it's definitely a very different community.
It's very different.
Yeah, some to the good and some to the not so good. We are certainly the epicenter of New West architecture in the Western United States. So that's kind of the hot new thing in the architecture world. So a lot of the older kind of decrepit structures are getting torn down for these very modern, sophisticated sort of stone and wood and glass buildings. Kind of hard to describe. So like my side of town, East Jackson, was all kind of old buildings. And a lot of them are all getting snapped up.
There's a couple old ones still, but not very many.
I like New West architecture. I think it's pretty, but it is hard to see some of those old buildings go. It's definitely getting a little, dare I say, gentrified?
Yeah.
I think that's the term I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I live in a really old building. I believe it was built in the 70s, so.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I can hardly argue this building's that we're broadcasting from is about 15 years old, so I can't really criticize. But all right, I don't know if I see any more questions. If I've missed your question somehow, we'll definitely get to it in the comment section. We'll get you an answer. Or if you're watching this after our live broadcast, we will check for questions for the next week here and answer them as they come in. But in the meantime, it's been a pleasure, guys. I hope everybody had a great January, have a good February, a good Valentine's Day. We're excited to see you the first Wednesday of every month at 5:30 Mountain Time, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, everyone.